Hello, everyone. I'm Shwetangana Chakrabarti, the editor of the International Educator. A big warm welcome to the Thai podcast series. The Thai podcasts aim to bring alive the latest research in education, leadership strategies, DEIJ initiatives, classroom stories, and student initiatives. Thai will be inviting the thought leaders, the school leaders, the student leaders in international education to share their stories with our audience. In the next 20 to 30 minutes, we will take you through a journey of excellence in education. This is our way of building capacity within our community by inspiring, equipping, and empowering you with the finest examples of practice in education. Keep listening and keep sharing.
Warm welcome to everybody. This podcast is being brought to you jointly by the International Educator and the Principals Training Center. Both the PTC and Thai are arms of the same nonprofit organization, and I'm Bambi Betts, the CEO of our overarching organization. Since the beginning, over 3 decades ago, our mission has always been the same, and it's to provide services and tools to advance learning and leading and teaching in international schools. And as many of you will know, PTC provides professional learning opportunities for educators and for leaders, and Thai provides recruitment and career development tools, as well as curates and creates content relevant to international schools. So as a service organization, we, like probably you in your schools, feel that we have a moral obligation, a moral responsibility to continually explore and create new ways to assist international schools to remain have that laser focus on their purpose of more and better learning for all kids, the ones that are in their charge. So in fact, this whole series that you're going to be engaging with is dedicated to exploring one such major tool, and this is the use of the standards of practice for international educators as one way to advance quality teaching, to uplift the profession. This is really important to us, is that we want to uplift the profession. We often have issues with whether we are a full-fledged profession, and one of the ways that we can do that is through the establishment and promotion and reaching towards standards, and of course their application to achieve more equity of access by all kids to quality teaching. So that's kind of the big overarching idea. So over the past several years, Thai and the PTC have collaborated with researchers and practitioners who are really focused on this idea of quality teaching being the major ingredient, the difference to learning and teaching. And together we've established these international standards of practice. Apart from that, many schools around the world have realized the power of standards in general to impact learning. And today we're going to have a conversation about that with some representatives of a particular international school. To guide us to the diving in piece here, we've invited Sue Easton, who is our Director of Programs at the PTC, to get us started. So Sue, over to you.
Welcome to the podcast, Lisa and Peter. We are so happy to have you here from Nagoya International School. Could you please introduce yourselves to our listeners, telling us a little bit about yourselves and your role at NIS in relation to working with teacher development? Let's start with you, Lisa.
Hi, everybody. I am the secondary principal at NIS, and one of my responsibilities, which I've taken on particularly from this calendar year, is our professional growth pathway. And so I'm the admin that's overall responsible for how that is pushed out for all of our teachers at NIS.
Great, thank you. And Pete, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Pete Goodman. I'm the MYP coordinator here at NIS. I've been at the school for 6 years, and so a lot of my work is closely tied with the work of Lisa's, and I work with the middle years teachers, helping and supporting their growth and development as well.
Wonderful. And great to see you again, Pete. It was so great having you in our class in London.
It was great.
All right. So we would love to hear the story of how teacher standards were chosen in Nagoya. So I don't know if that would be both of you, or if it would start with Pete and maybe Lisa could chime in about how they look now. We'd just love to hear the story of how your plan came into place.
So you might want to just reframe that question. Sorry, do you want to ask that question again? Just because it's the teaching standards were in place by the time I got there because Matthew Parr. So you might want to say not about chosen. You might want to just reframe it as like, what teaching standards do you use, for example?
Okay, that's good. Although it would be good for you to also talk about that they were chosen before, and I wonder where they were chosen from. Interesting. Okay. All right. So thank you so much. We would love to hear the story of the progression from when the teacher standards were originally chosen in Nagoya by your head of school, Matthew Parr, to how they are actually used today. So maybe we can start with Pete, because I know that he was instrumental at the beginning, and then lead into what Lisa is doing now with them at NIS.
Yeah, thank you. The teaching standards that we use, that were in place and developed, I think, with Matthew Parr, with the PTC at the time, they were in place at the time that I came in, and they cover 5 broad themes, which is effective learning, differentiation, classroom relationships, attention to detail, and then professionalism. And then under those, there's a series of indicators. They're used for our professional growth models, and the teachers are working with them and selecting, identifying teaching standards that they need to work on, and that's in conjunction with their supervisors and their teams. And then they use those standards to help build the backbone of their professional growth plans.
And what we have is, sorry.
That's okay. Sorry, Lisa, I'd love to hear how it looks now.
When I came in, I've been at NIS for a year and a half now. So when I came in, it was coming into something that was pretty established within the community. But what we noticed was that still that the link between those standards, which are pretty clear when you look at them, how they should be impacting teaching and learning, and the link between an individual's own personal professional growth maybe wasn't as strong and as coherent as what it should be when you are looking at standards as a way to guide your reflective practice. And so what we have been really looking to do is to make sure that when teachers are using these standards, is that they keep coming back to that key point of how is this impacting the classroom? How is this supporting what students are experiencing when they go into my lessons? And this is what we've been really trying to work with by making small tweaks in how and actually the pathway process that we have within
Fantastic. And I think that's such a great message to our listeners, the idea that a plan is not done once it is created, that there are constantly tweaks. I wondered about the indicators that Pete talked about. Have, especially since the pandemic, have the indicators for each of the 5 standards, have they changed in any way, especially when you added on the virtual component as well?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I think I wouldn't say the indicators themselves have changed, but maybe the emphasis as to what's most prevalent, what's most relevant for a teacher and a school has certainly shifted. I mean, one of the indicators was digital citizenship, and lifelong learning was another one. And so when you think about those two together and the impact of the pandemic, there was a massive upshift. There was a massive upskilling in the tech skills of all teachers all over the world. That indicator was already in one of our standards, and so I think it's natural that perhaps during the the many years that we've had this pandemic now, that more teachers have gravitated towards that being one of the standards, one of the indicators that they desire to work on the most, or that they can call on the most reflection in terms of the most, of the growth that they've exhibited over the last few years.
Great. I love that the weighting changes based on the context. Great. Sorry, Lisa.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add on, and I think that whilst the standards haven't changed, when teachers are going through the process and looking at and are in the inquiry phase of the process, the feedback that they receive, whether from students or from colleagues, will have changed because of what's happening within the school and within the classroom based on the global pandemic and other factors. And so therefore that feedback will then influence where they go with their professional growth.
I love that. When the PTC TIE standards were first created, there was a lot of pushback from people saying, well, where's the rubric? Where are the indicators? And we just feel really strongly that it's contextual. And that's just a great example of that, even if they don't change, that the weighting of them changes based on feedback, based on what's going on in the world. So that's great. Lisa, you alluded to what fascinated me. One of the things I found most fascinating in the approach that you were taking, which was the inquiry approach that you were taking to using these standards. So can you talk a little bit about how an inquiry, whatever you say, how an inquiry is determined by your teachers and what the process is that they go through as they are going through a school year, or if it is beyond a school year? We'd love to hear your process.
Okay, great. So it's a calendar year that we follow for our PG pathway, and we're coming to the end actually of our inquiry phase now, where all colleagues who are in the professional growth pathway are coming to the end of that. And I mean, Pete can probably talk about this a little bit more, but we needed to try and standardize that inquiry so that we could make sure institutionally that everybody was being a reflective learner and a lifelong learner and modeling the kind of practices that we want our students to exhibit. And so in this initial phase, there are predetermined goalposts that teachers need to make. One of them being that they have to collect feedback from 4 separate data points, one of them being their line manager or supervisor, and then their colleagues, general colleagues, and whether that's colleagues within the department or across departments, and then of course students most importantly. And then there's another area, a 4th area, which could be documentation or data or some other form of the inquiry process. What else am I missing, Pete?
No, that's fantastic. It's underpinned then by like a teacher's self-reflection, so they reflect against the standards themselves, and then the reason for the 4 areas like supporting that is so that you don't get blindsided, so that you don't just focus on standards and you end up gravitating to the one that you most resonate with and you most want to work on, because then the growth becomes a task, it becomes a thing to do. Like looking at other areas and taking a step back before you start the plan means that you're opening yourself up to other areas, to other sources of information, and then you're able to make a much more objective decision as to actually which area is going to most represent growth for you, which is going to impact student learning. And so if you just reflected on standards, if you just chose it yourself, you are more likely, I think, to end up doing the same thing every year, or to get or to become very narrow focused and just focus on the things that you want to focus on.
And one thing that we've been really working with this year is really driving home that it is a learning goal. It's not a task. And therefore, teachers already, when I launched the pathway and when we came back straight after Christmas break, there were teachers already in that first one. They were like, I know what my goal is. I want to be off and going. And we're having to pull them back and say, hold on, you need to get these four, you need to open your blind spot. You need to get these four areas of inquiry completed first. We also have coaches attached who are not your supervisor. So it really comes in as a kind of a critical friend idea, is your coach. And so, you need to have conversations with a certain number of people before you can go ahead and then say, okay, this is my goal for the year based on this particular standard.
That's great. I think that our listeners will be excited to hear about the enthusiasm of your teachers about this process. You talked about it being a calendar year. Can you just tell us what happens at the end of the year? Is that the end of the inquiry? Can it continue? Is there an event at the end? What happens at the end of the year?
Do you want
Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I could jump in. I guess the rationale for the calendar year is we used to have, previously, before that we worked on the professional growth model, we used to have a lead-in year, so like a settling in year for teachers. And then the next academic year, they would start professional growth. And then you continue professional growth, all the other pathway models that we have. And then you typically in the international circuit, you tend to make your decisions around about November, December as to whether you're going to stay or whether you're going to move on. That's part of the recontracting process. And I think two things. One, we felt it was a bit of a wasted opportunity for some teachers who were but they were just getting into the next academic year's worth of professional growth, September, October, and they're already kind of thinking, well, I'm moving on next year, so they're less invested in that process of growth, particularly if they think it's a job to do, if they think it's a task that has to get done. And we also felt for many teachers, they don't necessarily need a full academic year to get settled into a school. There's obviously things that crop up, but you can generally get settled pretty quickly within the first 6 months. And so we have a lead-in period from August until September, from August until December. And then the calendar year starts, which is when we have the professional growth for that calendar year. The bonus being is, I think also, lots of teachers do, professional reading, and they do courses like the PTC, for example, over the summer, which can, as they come out of the inquiry phase and they've built their plan, then they can do that learning. They can actually do a lot of learning over this time. And then they can come back afresh for the new academic year and put that plan into action and see what happens. The third benefit then is for those teachers who have decided to move on for the last few months of the contract, we have another pathway called the legacy pathway. So as they come out of the end of professional growth at the end of the calendar year, their next cycle is only a few months long, but it's called legacy. So we have an entrance pathway, a main pathway, set of pathways, and then an exit pathway as well. So that's the main rationale for it being the calendar year.
Got it. Very well thought out. So you've shared with us about your standards. You've shared about your process and the inquiry process. One of the main reasons that we started the podcast was just to elevate this idea of all international teachers having a set of standards so that there is a level of consistency and that all of our students get a high level of teaching and learning happening at their schools. Ty, as Bambi said before we started, Ty working with the PTC, James Strong, Kevin Simpson, they've taken the standards and they've created a Ty resume builder that is part of their site. And the idea behind the resume builder is that it incorporates all of the PTC standards, but it allows teachers and leaders and counselors to collect evidence in one location. And I know that many schools do that. And they have some sort of way that they collect their data. The beauty of doing it with the TIE Resume Builder is that it goes with the teacher so that they are continuing to collect data. And we're starting to get schools that are actually doing their professional growth and supervision data collection right on the TIE Resume Builder, which is really exciting. The hard part is that people don't always know what the evidence might look like. So I am so thrilled that you are going to talk about one of the standards that people really struggle with. So the standard that comes from TIE and from the PTC says that international school teachers will ensure that his or her work results in acceptable and measurable student progress. And you both talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to hear what evidence would you be looking for, listening for, asking teachers to collect if this exact standard was a professional standard at NIS. So I'll say it again. International school teachers will ensure that his or her work results in acceptable and measurable student progress. What would you be looking for as evidence? And maybe we can start with Lisa and then go on to Pete.
I think I would get a little bit of a pushback from some of the teachers that we work with on this, because we have people on the pathway who maybe their main job isn't in the classroom anymore, and then I would push back on that and say we still have impact on the learning that's going on within the classroom, and so you must be able to have a benchmark of where you're starting with in regards to student measurement. And I think that's why having different phases within a professional growth pathway that we have enables us to, as part of that initial inquiry phases, find out where is my benchmark for this particular area that I am, whether it's the way I'm pacing in a classroom or whatever, whether it's something actionable like that, or whether it's something a little bit more intangible. I as part of that initial process that our staff are currently working on is to find what is that benchmark, what is that point, and then from there they then plan and write in discussion with their coaches, how am I going to then show improvement in this particular area? And then, as they go through, as Pete said, they'll do their learning on a particular thing and they'll look at that and they'll try different things in the classroom and then hopefully reflect on it. And the goal would be for me as an administrator is that learning, even though that professional growth has finished for the year in November, is that this is something that now is embedded in everyday practice with the teacher, and even more so, they might become passionate about it and start advocating that this is something that is really good, and coming to me and saying, I want to run a Skillshares workshop. I want some collaboration time so that I can get a group of people to come on board with what I'm doing. So from an administrative perspective, I think that's what I would be looking for. I'm sure Pete's got some other tangible classroom things to chat about as MYP coordinator.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. I think just to build on what you said, Lisa, as well, I think even if that one calendar year that it's not yet embedded, that the ignition that you get as an educator when you've done some learning and you can trial it and you can see it, it may well become the next year's like focus as well, but it will be tweaked. And we've talked about tweaking and changing things. And I think in the word you read, in the sentence you read, Sue, the about being measurable, I think that's one thing that we've really added this year, is like, how are you actually going to measure the impact of that learning? And that's been quite a recent evolution in the professional growth model that we do, is okay, you've identified a learning goal, but now is it actually measurable, and how do you intend to measure it? In terms of ensuring that it results in acceptable and measurable student progress. If we go back to the 4 areas that we look for, like the one thing that we ask teachers to look for at the start is data and their documentation. So, it's quite a crude measure to begin with, but student data, so students' results, like student attainment results, would be some kind of evidence. Probably and you might need to think about different ways of actually like collecting this measurement, but like student voice, so actually asking the students, for example, where were they before? What's changed, like in their learning, and then what's been the impact for them? Actually speaking to the students and finding out firsthand, the noticeable changes and the intentional changes that's happened, and then what's been the impact for them. And I mean, we do like several ways of collecting student voice. We do surveys. We do like Flipgrid videos, for example, like collecting their actual voice, for example. So I think that would also be another really good tangible piece of evidence, and one that not only that individual teacher like can reflect on, but if those are shared as like examples of good practice, it can also be inspiration for other teachers, I think.
Great, some very helpful specific examples. The fact that you start off with the benchmark data that they have to collect in the post data, student perception data. I love that you added in the Flipgrids as well, seeing it embedded in practice. And then the ultimate, I love that, Lisa, for them to actually offer to do workshops or hold groups at the school. Lots of really practical examples there. I think the recurring theme I keep hearing, though, is that at NIST, no one is alone. So no one is doing this alone. There is such a great support system. So wonderful messages. Final thing that I wanted to ask you both is to give one sentence of advice for a school who's just starting their journey towards implementing teacher standards. And I want you to think about what you would do and what you wouldn't do. But if we could just narrow it down to just one sentence each, that would be perfect.
I'll go first.
Thanks, Lisa.
I'll let Pete think about it. I would say that as an administrator, you need to really focus on the process. What could happen is people could, and what has happened with us still is people focus on that there has to be an actionable or a product or a success. And, that's part of learning. Learning is reflecting and failing at something or it not quite working. And so I think if you have these standards that you're using and you really say these standards are a guide for our process of reflection and our process of learning, then that would be what I would really encourage people starting on this journey or continuing to develop the journey, is that it's about the process.
I would probably, the one thing I would do is I would keep coming back to the question of where's the learning. I remember an IB workshop that I did once, and the field rep kept like dropping it. It's a personal project from the NYP, and the field rep kept dropping in and saying, "Where's the learning?" Every few hours, where's the learning? Where's the learning? Where's the learning? And so I would encourage the schools to focus, as Lisa quite rightly said, on the process itself and ensure that the learning for the teachers is in place and evident and measurable, and that learning also then transfers to the students. And so I would say, yeah, I would keep that question in mind. Is the learning evident? Is the learning intentional? Is the learning meaningful? And is the learning measurable?
Wonderful, both of you. Neither of you mentioned, though, what would you avoid? What would be something that you learned from and you want to tell other schools so that they don't have the same experience? Pete, you have something I can see.
I wouldn't. I would say, don't think you're done with one iteration. So as you implement something, be ready to reflect on it, just like we ask our teachers to do, like we ask our students to do. Be ready to reflect on it and be ready to evolve it. And I use the word evolve rather than change, because there'll be elements of it that work for the school and elements that aren't quite right. And so I would say, yeah, don't fall into the trap of thinking you have it right the first time, be ready and be mindful and be intentional that you are always ready to tweak it and to change it and to improve it.
Thank you. Lisa, anything you would add?
No, I think Pete's articulated that really, really well. I think, okay, yes, I would add one thing, and that is, don't be scared of new voices coming in and offering suggestions. So, as Pete said, evolution is really important. So, I've come in, and after a year and a half, I'm now kind of digging really into it and deeply, and there isn't any changes. If you looked at it on surface value, there isn't changes, but there are tweaks here and there. And as Pete said right at the beginning of the podcast, the tweaks are so that we really focus on that learning, is what we are trying this year to really, really drive home again. It's about learning.
Wonderful. Sincere thanks to both of you for sharing both your wisdom and your experience. Until next time, this is Sue Easton from the TIE Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the TIE Podcast. We will be back again with more to keep you informed and to keep you connected with international educators from around the world. Do check out our website for more news and research articles on international education. Also, write to me at editor@tieonline.com if you would like to share an article. Article submission details can also be found on our website www.tieonline.com. Once again, thank you and hope you learned something new today. Stay kind and stay connected. See you soon.